To set up AMQ in a hybrid environment, I've used two instances of OpenShift. By doing that, I have abstracted away the details of the underlying infrastructure. So you can imagine that instance 1 of OpenShift is deployed on AWS, while instance 2 can be deployed on GCP or on-prem. It really doesn't matter because OpenShift will provide a consistent experience for my cluster regardless of the underlying infrastructure. And I've used Interconnect to link both AMQ clusters on both OpenShift instances. Now, the benefit of doing that is my producer and consumer don't have to care about the topology of the network. The interconnect routers are responsible for delivering the message from the producer to a consumer. So I've set up two AMQ clusters, one on each of the OpenShift instances, and I've used a mesh topology with two nodes per region or cluster. Both region 1 nodes are interconnected and both region 2 nodes are interconnected. Each node in region 2 interconnects with a node in region 1. Now let's quickly take a look at our clusters. Cluster 1 is deployed on this instance of OpenShift. The version of OpenShift here is 4.5. And I've exposed this route to manage the communication to this cluster, while the second AMQ cluster is deployed on this OpenShift instance. This is an older version of OpenShift, so that's release 4.3. And in the same way, if we go to our networking and routes, I've set up this route to handle the connections to this cluster. To test this setup, I've built a simple application using Fuse to act as my consumer. So note that the connectivity is configured to point at the router we just highlighted. And if we look at our camel context, I'm simply creating a test queue to accept incoming messages. Now let's start our application. So this will start up our consumer. We can see that a receiver is now connected to our cluster. In the same way, I've built a producer using Fuse. So again, I'm using the connectivity configuration to point at the router we've created for this purpose in cluster 2. And if we look at the camel context, we're simply using a timer to trigger a message to be sent to the same queue we've configured in the consumer. So let's start up the producer. So the producer has started sending messages. And if I go back to my topology, we can see that a sender has been created. And now if we look at our consumer, we see that it has indeed started receiving messages from our producer.